Is Game Pass good? Or maybe, has Game Pass changed the gaming industry in a positive way? It's a question we as gamers have heard and talked about for quite a while now, especially in the last few years. First, we hear it's an amazing deal and that it's making its money and then some. Shortly after, though, we see that it's followed by, oh, it hurts sales for games, but only depending on the size of the game / publisher actually making it. Then we hear again that it's amazing now that Xbox and Microsoft have finally had a steady line of content to release, 2025 definitely showing that in spades, after they acquired people like Activision. And now it's back on the other side of the table with former founders of studios and publishing directors of all people saying that it is hurting the industry. So what's going on here? What is the answer? Is it bad? Is it good? Well, that's what we're going to discuss today. Let's talk about this. And of course, if you have your own opinions, then let us know in the comments below. Do you use Game Pass? Did you use it in the past, but you don't now? Are you still subscribed to it to this day? I want to see all the comments down below. It's always interesting to see how everyone approaches gaming. Okay, enough rambling though, let's get started. Now, the quote or quotes that I mentioned up in the intro come from one former founder of Arcane Studios and current publishing director of Larian Studios. From the former founder of Arcane Studios, he says, quote, "I think Game Pass is an unsustainable model that has been increasingly damaging the industry for a decade, subsidized by Microsoft's quote-unquote infinite money, but at the same point, reality has to hit. I don't think Game Pass can coexist with other models. They'll either kill everyone or give up." Damn! Not gonna lie, I was surprised to even see this on something like social media. This is not something that we see talked about publicly often when it comes to directors or anyone working in the business. But we have heard it talked about before. The most common talking point being from small dev teams / small indie games. Game Pass has been great to help out with those first-time projects. The bigger the game, though, it can hurt sales and revenue, especially when budgets are huge and people are getting laid off so much. I mean, let's just face the reality. Both are true. And look, before anyone makes it to the comments, yes, every team has to think about the money being made from their product. If they don't, they might not be able to keep updates coming or even make future games going forward. More so for the smaller teams, but you kind of get the idea. There's a reason that no matter how big or small your game is, money always has to play some kind of factor into it. Hey everyone, Editing Tallen here. So about 12 hours ago when I started editing this video, more news came out from when we saw that tweet from Christopher Dring, aka the co-founder of the game business. After everything that's being talked about when it comes to Game Pass, he ended up reaching out to Xbox and stating, "I asked for clarification on the Game Pass is profitable claim, and was told no first-party costs were included." And from the moment he posted that, well, you can kind of imagine the posts online and articles being written about all this new info. And to remind everyone, this is nothing new for companies to exclude or include certain things when it comes to projections and how much revenue they're making, what's profitable, what's not profitable, or what is technically profitable. I mean, big companies always find a way to word things in ways that make them look better than sometimes they might actually be. I mean, heck, let's take a look at Bungie, for example, if you wanted to. However, after that though, as of an hour ago at the time of this editing, he then clarified with another post saying, "Okay, I need to correct / clarify something. First, Xbox Game Pass is profitable even when you factor in the lost sales for its first-party teams. Sources who would know have told me. Over 18 months ago, I checked with Xbox about what's included in the Game Pass P&L. Basically, I was looking to see if Game Pass costs factor in the impact to the unit sales of their internal studios. I was told that first-party games have their own P&L separate to Game Pass as they make money via other means. I felt this piece of internal accountancy might mean Game Pass is profitable, but it sure does put pressure on the margins for its internal games and possibly means some studios don't make as much profit or any profit at all. That doesn't actually matter in real terms, but seeing the impact Game Pass will having on first-party games and the amount of money Xbox is spending on studios, I wanted to check if the full impact of the service had been considered in their Game Pass is profitable line. This was before Xbox started publishing fully on PS5. Studios can now make stronger margins on premium sales as a result of that move. But regardless to all of that, sources have reached out to tell me that even when you include lost revenue associated with first-party games, not just the unit sales, but the microtransactions, Game Pass is still profitable. So basically, the way I look at this, hopefully I'm reading this correctly, is that Xbox separates the Game Pass success, be it number of hours played, subscription numbers, etc., and the success from their AAA games, in different areas. However, based on what this guy was told, it supposedly is profitable. So as of 9 p.m. July 8th Japan time, when I am making this short little recording as I continue to edit this video, this is the latest news. You can call it whatever you want. So my question though is, has this info changed your personal opinion on the original question I asked in the beginning of the video? Let us know, of course, in the comments below. But anyway, let's get back to the main part of the video because I still want to talk about the rest of the information that I came across. Another point when it comes to Game Pass is how good of a deal this truly is for the players, especially nowadays. With prices increasing everywhere, not just including the games, having a subscription service where you can get a backlog of games and day one for new games, if you pay for the higher tier that is, can make it easier for a lot more people to get into gaming. Then if you really like a game, players will buy those games to support the devs even more so then future projects can be made. However, as we've seen over the years, this has not truly really been the reality. In a perfect world, yes, this would work really well, but we have started to see that this is not the case. Analysts have reported that sales of games on the Xbox have been going down when compared to PC, PS5, and even Switch, if those games do release on there. Some games don't even release on the platform since publishers know that the sales are going to be much lower. And of course, online, you've probably seen some version of this particular comment saying, Xbox players don't buy games. This, to me personally, has always been a little weird. We know sales obviously still happen on the platform, but we simply don't know how much. But it is hard to deny just how many of those sales are made when you see lots of comments under tons of video game trailers saying, is it on Game Pass? Or I'll try it out when it eventually gets to Game Pass, even for games that won't go on to Game Pass. This is probably reflected in a bunch of the data that those publishers see as well if they decide to put a game onto Xbox or Xbox Game Pass. There's just so much information that the public is never going to know because Microsoft, to be frank, is never going to release that information. But it is something to kind of keep in the back of your mind. Now, the way I've always looked at Game Pass is that it's similar to what Sega did way back in the early days of gaming, where you could actually access a lot of their games for a price per month. And, well, we've kind of seen what happened. It's kind of saying, oh, is history repeating itself here? Sega themselves have actually changed a lot, as they are now fully committed into a multi-platform publisher, which has actually worked out in the long run for them. In fact, Xbox is kind of following this same trajectory right now. The other way that I personally see Game Pass is how we used to rent games back in the day when we had places like Hollywood Video and Blockbuster. During that time, at least in my area, games were between $5 to $10 for about 5 days, and new games for the most part were included on the shelves that you could find. Of course, if everyone wanted to go play that game, you had to get there early, otherwise, tough luck. I think the thing that worked out well, though, during that particular time as well, though, was that if you did not finish the game and you really liked it, most of those places had a GameStop or a Game Crazy right next to them, so you could just walk into the store and buy it if you wanted to. Obviously, not a perfect one-on-one comparison when it comes to the current subscription model, but hopefully you get the point that I'm trying to make. One thing that a lot of people will knock against Game Pass is that it doesn't allow you to keep your games that you play. It's all subscription-based, and if they ever decide to remove games from the service, even if you continue to pay into it month over month, well, guess what? You're out of luck. Now, again, the whole point of Game Pass, at least in my mind, is that it is a great way to try out tons of games that you might not try, or you discover new games that you never even would have considered. But if you only play one type of game or just one game in general, then it doesn't make much sense to stay subscribed, which is what I'm assuming Microsoft does not like, and they are trying to find ways to get people to stay subscribed or even forget that they are simply subscribed. I mean, let's be perfectly honest, this is how every streaming system goes. And as we've seen in the last couple of years, prices have been increasing for this. The level and the type of plan that you buy into determines if you get new games on day one, even though way back when they started, they had promised that, hey, day one games are going to be there regardless. Well, that's definitely changed. And there have even been some rumors about ads being played at lower tiers. However, though, for this particular part right here, those are just rumors the last time I checked. I have not heard anything about it. I haven't seen any videos. So it looks like as of right now in 2025, that is not the case. But as we've seen with other platforms like YouTube and Google and everything else, basically, it wouldn't surprise me down the line. It certainly wouldn't. Businesses are going to business. That's just the way it is. One thing that I am personally still curious about, though, is Call of Duty being on the system. When looking at the math, I was actually truly shocked that they even tried to put this on the Game Pass. COD makes a ton of money. And one thing that I was particularly curious about is if tons of players signed up, which Microsoft obviously likes, but then canceled once they finished the single player and maybe played the multiplayer for 1 to 2 months. especially since things like Warzone is free to play. I know we're never actually going to see those numbers, but I would simply be curious to see how well it worked out for them. Will it cause prices to increase again if they lost a ton of that revenue compared to years before? Are prices going to stay the same? We know they're not going to go down. They never go down at this point. Will they create a COD Game Pass that only has Call of Duty? I could actually kind of potentially see them doing this, but we'll have to wait and see. I mean, they ended their summer showcase with the next Call of Duty releasing in the next holiday season, and the comments online were not nice about that. So, after talking about all this stuff, we have finally come full circle to the comments that we have seen from devs, publishers, and most recently, that former founder of Arcane, which, remind you, Arcane is no more since the failure of Redfall. In fact, we've seen this even more with games that supposedly do well. I mean, heck, it used to be if your game did well, then you really shouldn't be fired unless big circumstances happened. But even that does not save you from being axed. Anyone remember Tango Game Studios and their game HiFi Rush? Yeah, Xbox was calling it the greatest hit of that year, and it did amazing for them, supposedly. Only for the studio to then get shut down. Now, that doesn't really make sense when you start to see headlines saying 2 million players were playing this game and everything, but when you look a little closer, it kind of does. Those millions of players playing, those are not sales. Those numbers are players playing. However, if we go back to that quote that we've seen beforehand from other devs and publishers and the works, shouldn't that matter? Because according to what Xbox has told them or what they have told the public, that should matter. But for some reason, Tango still got shut down. Luckily, they got saved a little bit later. Now, one of the questions you might get from that particular time, though, was, did a lot of people sign up for Game Pass back then? However, you also have to remember during that particular time is that you could sign up for $1. Then what a lot of people did, especially back then, was cancel a month later, and that is a lot of lost money for Microsoft right there. When I delve a little deeper, what I found really interesting was how many players actually finished HiFi Rush. You might actually shock you, and this is for every game that you can possibly imagine. Not everyone finishes your games. If there's one thing that achievements and trophies have really showed us is that gamers don't finish games. Now, I'm not saying you have to platinum / 100% the achievements of said games or anything, but it really does show sometimes. I mean, heck, some of my favorite games I've ever played are like, hey, only 84% of people have done this very basic defeat your first enemy. So that really says something like there. I mean, heck, as with any game, the highest achievements that we're going to see are at the beginning of the game. Makes sense, right? We see this everywhere. But HiFi Rush only has, according to TrueAchievements.com, a 4% completion. And this game, according to my friends who have actually played it, it's not that long of a game. So did people simply get bored of the game? What happened? Then we also started to see headlines saying that 50% of HiFi Rush Xbox players, doesn't say PC, just Xbox players, didn't even beat the first boss. Now, granted, I don't know how long it is from the beginning of the game to said first boss, but only 50% of players beat the first boss? Okay, doesn't really make much sense to me. Does this mean that PC helped bump up that completion percent? How does a game that is called a success by Xbox / Microsoft result in a studio being shut down? And please, don't try to give me any of that BS explanation that they tried with the time zones make it hard to manage. That had to be one of the worst excuses I've ever heard in my life. Now, like I said before, Tango Game Studios luckily was able to be picked up and they are now working on a brand new game. But not every person / team laid off is that lucky. It really sucks when you realize that even if your game is a success, you're not 100% safe. Most recently, we actually saw Square release Final Fantasy 16 on Xbox, and soon Remake is going to be released on there as well. The sales for 16 seem to be pretty low, but we don't know 100% for sure. Now, obviously, 16 is not only a controversial game within the Final Fantasy fan base, I personally loved it, and it's also a 2-year-old game coming out at full price on the platform where a lot of people prefer to use a subscription service to play their games and not buy their games. Not saying that everyone doesn't buy their games, but that's just generally how it's looked at. I mean, my question is when it comes to Remake, for example, in this upcoming winter, how well is that game going to do? Final Fantasy VII is definitely more popular than Final Fantasy 16, so only time is going to tell. Square's a couple years right now into their big multi-platform push, similar to what Capcom did a few years earlier. Is Square going to continue making games for the platform if the PC, the Switch, and the PlayStation can just make up that revenue and they don't need to spend money on an Xbox port? On the other hand, though, we've also seen Capcom and Atlas continue to make games for the platform, and even some going on to Game Pass. So, what's the story here? Should Microsoft go with more of a Sony approach where only older games are going to be on the platform and then sell their brand new games? I personally don't see that happening, since a lot of gamers on the platform, again, are conditioned with Game Pass in mind. Will we simply see more price increases? Only time is going to tell. My personal final thought, though, when it comes to all this, I will say, is that as someone looking in from the outside, which is all of us, keep in mind, none of us are at the actual table making these decisions, the math sometimes does not seem to be mathing. I will say this, though. I feel pretty confident in saying that we should expect more price increases as time goes on, and that shareholders will not let this go on forever unless more revenue is coming in. Not saying it's right, but that's just simply how big businesses and companies work. They are not our friends. Always remember that. But with all this information now finally being said, I want to ask you right now, what do you think about this? Do you think Game Pass is going to continue as it is? Do you think Microsoft is telling the truth 100% about it being profitable, but having to split how they claim it to be? Let us know all your thoughts in the comments below. And of course, thank you so much for stopping by the video. If you want to see more of these discussions, then make sure to join us every Friday live here on YouTube and Twitch. And of course, hit that sub button and like buttons if you want to see more discussions. I've been Tallen with Direct Gaming. Thank you so much for stopping by the video. I hope you have a great day and week, and I can't wait to see you all in the next video. Johnny.